Hello, my name's Ben,
And my name's Josh.
and welcome back to FPL Graduates, and welcome back to another video, another game week guide video. We're going to be going ahead and looking towards game week 6. This could be a huge game week with a lot of swings going into it. There's certainly a lot of transfers and a lot of chips flying around, so we're going to give you the lowdown on everything you should need to know ahead of this game week.
Yes, indeed. It's going to be a massive game week. Obviously, we're recording this to sort of say on Tuesday night, just before the Carabao Cup games are getting underway. Obviously, I think there's 10 teams in action in total. So, usually, our advice, similar to last week, is always to wait until those games are finished at the bare minimum. There's been quite a few rises and falls already. So, if you haven't hit the wild card yet, then there's probably no real reason to hit it right now. So, yeah, getting into the first update, then we obviously had some news on Erling Haaland. Came off a little bit earlier against Arsenal with some back issues. And Guardiola said that basically he hasn't trained yet this week, which none of the team have. And that he should be back for the weekend. Obviously, we didn't really expect him to feature against Huddersfield in the EFL Cup anyway. City, you imagine, will put out a rotated side for that. Ben, what's your thoughts on this? Do you think it's just sort of smoke and mirrors for the Premier League at the weekend?
Oh yeah, 100% is smoke and mirrors for the Premier League. First of all, on the day after a game, no player is going to be training for Manchester City if they've played more than you know 45, 50 minutes. So yeah, there's gonna be very little players, if any, training on Monday. Of course, on Tuesday, you'd expect him to maybe sort of train. If he hasn't today, then fine. It might be just a longer recovery time for him because of this back issue that it says. But look, he's going to be back for this weekend. I imagine he's not training because he's not involved in the squad for the Carabao Cup game. So look, it's not something that I'm too concerned about. He played very well with considering he had some sort of injury. So look, I think that the quotes are out there, maybe to sort of scare off managers and maybe sort of point them in another direction. I think it's something that you don't really need to worry too much about.
Yeah, someone who we probably will need to worry about if you did bring him in last week, though, is Cole Palmer. The update that we had today after he came off early against Manchester United is that he could be out for around 3 to 6 weeks, is what Simon Phillips is reporting. So, yeah, not ideal for Cole Palmer. It's the same groin issue that he had throughout the Club World Cup that he injured at the start of the season and now has sort of re-injured again. There has been talk about surgery to fix it more longer term. I imagine if he keeps re-injuring, that'll probably happen. So we'll have to wait and see for a more clearer update on that. It's obviously more of a rumour than a necessarily 100% confirmation, but Simon Phillips got it pretty bang on last time that we had a Cole Palmer injury update, so the sources there are pretty reliable. What's your thoughts on Palmer, Ben? You'd sell him right now, right?
Yeah, I'd sell him right now. Look, I genuinely think it's only a matter of time before he has that surgery, to be honest, because he's not been right for half of last season and all of this season so far. So I'd anticipate it's that same problem that's probably sort of niggling at him, which, is a shame. But 3 to 6 game weeks out, even after that, I would be hesitant to bring him straight back in just because of how much reoccurrence of injuries that we've seen from him. So yeah, definitely one to avoid and sell at this point.
Yeah, and then the final injury update, we can stop playing doctor after this, is Noni Madueke. He has been confirmed out for 2 months, or roughly around 2 months. There was some fears potentially of an ACL injury, but not too serious, which I guess is good news. Again, another Arsenal injury. It's been quite a common theme so far this season. Saliba, Saka, Madueke, just to name a couple. There's been even more than that. So, yeah, pretty frustrating for Arsenal. He looked really good, and he was definitely on my watch list going into that fixture swing in game week 7. But it probably makes Saka's minutes a little bit better, right, Ben?
Yeah, definitely. It makes him more secure. Look, despite not seeing the returns, we saw a lot of good stuff on the eye from Madueke. So it's definitely a shame that he's out for this for the foreseeable future. And like you said, it definitely strengthens Bukayo Saka as a potential asset going forward, especially as we saw 45 from him. I wasn't expecting to see him, come on so soon. So it's good to see that he's getting minutes. And yeah, I mean, it really sort of makes it interesting for those wild carding. It definitely puts some people ahead in that regard anyway.
Definitely. We will have a wildcard draft out the day after this is released, so make sure you stay tuned for that and check it out if you are looking to hit the wild card. We'll go into some midfielders now then. Obviously, we mentioned Bukayo Saka just then. He obviously came back and played 45 in the second half against Manchester City at the weekend. Definitely feel like it's going to be a phased approach back, especially now that Noni Madueke is injured. There's no direct sort of right winger replacement as we've seen, unless they chuck Trossard over there like they've done in the past. So yeah, it's going to be interesting. Obviously, Arsenal are in action in midweek, and then they obviously go to Newcastle away, and then it's Champions League before that nicer fixture in West Ham. So I think, yeah, there will be minutes given to Saka, but like Ben alluded to when talking about Madueke, I think it's going to be more limited. We might see 60 minutes at Newcastle, 70 minutes in the Champions League, things like that, to see him gradually build up back to speed. What's your thoughts, Ben, on Saka? His price and ownership is so tempting, but I think it's got to be a bit of patience to be used for this one, right?
Yeah, you say that, but I think I'm going to transfer him in this week, in all honesty, because of how good we've seen him as an asset before and how explosive he can be. I do think even without, the injury coming back, and sort of the phased approach, I do think 60 or 70 minutes for those Arsenal wingers is about right, even when he's fully fit. So I don't think it's a bad option. It's just a shame it's come like a week early, this Madueke injury. If it had come next week, then Bukayo Saka probably is already 9.9. So yeah, the entry point means that it makes it a little difficult this week. But look, you know what you're going to get with Bukayo Saka, and that at that ownership level, like you said, it is really, really tempting. So yeah, really do like him as an asset, and obviously when he sort of fades back in the next 2 to 3 game weeks, he's going to be absolutely integral to everything Arsenal do going forwards.
Yeah, indeed. It'll be interesting, especially as well, to see if he has any share of those penalties, which Gyökeres looks like he's got at the moment. Bruno Fernandes is up next then, so we're going to gradually go down the price points. I think, the next 2 fixtures, United attackers could be on the cards with Brentford away and Sunderland at home. Second highest XG in the league so far this season, so they are creating chances, just not necessarily putting them away. Obviously, the performance against Chelsea is maybe a little bit skewed with the red card to begin with, but I think overall, even in that early 5 minutes, they look like the much better team to kick things off. Ben, you own Bruno Fernandes at the moment. Is he someone who you could just probably keep hold of, really, and he'll just tick along nicely, right?
Yeah, like he's what you're going to get with Bruno Fernandes, and he's one where the fixtures are sort of pretty average all the way through. So he's one that you can just keep throughout and not have to worry too much about. The output will be very similar for, no matter who the opponent. So that's a good point. And he's also one that you've got 9 million in him. It means that if something drastically changes with the premiums, you can use Bruno Fernandes to facilitate any moves. So he's good to have in the squad for that reason, because you can sort of downgrade and upgrade to the more premium and budget players quite quickly. So he's definitely a flexible option to have in there, and I'd definitely recommend considering him if you don't already for your teams.
Yeah, indeed. We're getting into the more the Salah replacements for the Salah and Haaland transfers now. We're looking at Brian and Bumo next. Obviously, we mentioned that United's next two fixtures are decent. Obviously, Bumo himself is only second to Erling Haaland in terms of XG so far this season. He's been racking it up. Just the one goal, though, so far. I think he's probably been United's brightest spark in the attacking line at the moment. 2 fixtures where those two defenses aren't the worst, but I think there's definitely goals to be had for United if they continue playing the way they are. Brentford in particular, obviously he's going back to his former club. I'm sure he's going to hopefully get a goal there this weekend. What's your thoughts, Ben, in terms of those United midfielders? Do you think the 0.9 million it is at the moment, is it worth going up to Bruno Fernandes, or could you justify maybe on a shorter term level going for Brian and Bumo?
I think you can justify short term. It's all about strategy here. Look, if you're looking at long term, Bruno Fernandes is going to be worth it over the longer run by far, with the penalty and free kicks and corners and everything in between. But if you're looking for some potential explosivity on a low-owned asset, then I don't think Mbeumo is a bad option. It's just a case though that you've just got to bear in mind that for those more difficult fixtures, you are going to have to play him through. We know how consistent Bruno is. We haven't seen that in a Manchester United shirt anyway from Mbeumo yet. So that's just one to bear in mind there. It's a little bit more risk, in my opinion, despite it being a lower price point, just given because of how, consistent Bruno's been.
Yeah, indeed. Someone who's definitely much more higher owned is Antoine Semenyo, probably the favourite for the Salah sort of replacement in those two-way transfers that most people will be making this week. The fixture run's really good. He's off the back of a DEFCON return against Newcastle, and then obviously that double-digit haul before that. He's just been really consistent so far this season, which I think a lot of people are struggling with in terms of their teams. Just no real player they can hang their hat on and be like, he's going to get me returns every week. So yeah, that's why probably the ownership is nearly at 50%, with 47% of managers owning him at the moment. He's been very good so far, potentially got penalties as well. We haven't seen him take one with Clivert on the pitch yet, so that's sort of waiting to be seen. What's your thoughts on him, Ben?
Yeah, I mean, he's probably been the player that killed me the most not owning, and the price point's already 0.7 more than he was at the start of the season, which is just a little bit crazy. But look, he's looking very consistent, even against the better teams. So I do think it's worth having him in your team if you've not done already. I'm looking and planning and bringing him in myself this week as well. He's definitely sort of top of the list alongside Saka on players to get in. So I'll certainly be transferring him in. And look, it's unfortunate that he's just going to become template and you're not going to get any points gains out of it. But at this point in the season, it's very risky to go without him at this point.
Yeah, exactly that, and it's not a case of like the boat's gone. I think the boat, the boat. I think I saw someone say the boat's refueling at the moment. So yeah, he's definitely going to be able to hop on him. Mohamed Kudus is next. Spurs have two really nice next fixtures. I think you could argue two of the best. With Wolves at home is a very nice fixture at the moment with the way that Wolves are defending. They're not looking great at the back. Kudus off the back of 2 assists against Brighton. He didn't pick up any bonus points though, which is something of note. 2 quite lucky assists, I must add, when the first one was a shot and the second one nearly took a nick off his own player when it went in off of Van Heck. So, yeah, maybe a little bit fortunate. I think my biggest concern with Kudus is he offers little to none goal threat at all. And then the assists that he's had so far, obviously Gameweek 1 he got 2 for Richarlison against a Burnley side, and then the ones against Brighton were relatively lucky, and the sort of expected goal involvement isn't necessarily saying that he should be getting even more than he currently is. So Ben, do you have a more sort of positive outlook on Mohamed Kudus than I do?
I mean, to be honest, he has looked good on the eye test, and of course, the XGI is not sort of matching up, and he's overperforming a bit. And look, we're at that stage of the season where the sample size of data is still not quite where we want it to be, so we're going to have to just bear that in mind. But look, as a short-term pick over the next 2, I don't think you can get better at the price point that he's at. He's just 6.6 million, and he's got Wolves at home, Leeds away, and is playing for arguably, a very good Tottenham team at the moment, who should be looking to punish teams like these. So I think that the potential for the next 2 games is, and the prediction is, he's probably going to overperform his XGI again over these next 2 because of the quality of player that he's playing against. And then from sort of that point onwards, you might look to move him on. So it might be sort of a really nice short-term pick and an option to go for there.
Yeah, someone else around that price point is Jack Grealish. Again, similar sort of asset to Kudus there. The goal threat is low, the assist threat is high, and he's looked fantastic since joining Everton, to be quite frank. Looked really good against Liverpool as well. Obviously, West Ham up next. Palace and City after that are a lot tougher tests. It'd be interesting to see how Everton do, because I think so far this season they've impressed me in all the fixtures that they've played, basically, maybe barring that Leeds game in Gameweek 1, which was a tough watch. What's your thoughts, Ben, on Grealish? We're going to talk about Njai as well in a moment, but yeah, Grealish at the moment.
Yeah, I think he looks really, really good and really promising, and almost a new lease of life for him going to Everton. Look, yeah, very similar to Kudus. I think in the short term, going to be a very good option. Let's see how he gets on against Palace and Manchester City. But yeah, again, if you're looking to really target the fixtures this week, I think he's a good option. West Ham at home is a prime fixture really for Everton to take advantage of. And they are looking quite good going forwards, Everton. So I do back him to get a return or 2 in that one as well.
Yeah, definitely. I personally prefer Iliman Njai, just for the goal threat. He's got 2 goals and an assist already this season. He's definitely profiting off the fact that Jack Grealish is in that Everton team at the moment. Defcon as well is there with him. He's picked it up twice now this season, which is really good to see. The routes to points are quite nice for him. We don't know for sure if he's got penalties. We haven't seen one yet this season, so that's to be seen. He is probably the most likely though, is what I will say. So it could be quite promising there. Obviously, West Ham fixture is nice, and like I say, it does get tougher, but it wouldn't shock me if Everton were able to, put up a fight against the likes of Crystal Palace and City with the way that they're playing. We saw it at Anfield at the weekend that they gave Liverpool a good run for their money. So yeah, for me and Jai sort of pips Grealish just for the goal threat. What's your thoughts on him, Ben?
Yeah, I'd be inclined to agree there, just because he is at that sort of cheaper price point, 0.3 in it, and I think that does make quite a big difference at this point in the season, given budgets are quite tight, and we're looking at bringing in Haaland this week, so we're going to need as much budget as we can get to get him in. And Jai, seems to be the guy that's sort of picking up goals. Again, very similar to Grealish in terms of the XGI, maybe overperforming just a little bit, but I think in the early season, it's not too much to worry about at this point. And yeah, like Josh said, like Everton seem to be performing against everyone at the moment and seem to be putting up a good performance. So yeah, I don't mind Njai at all. And at that price point, he's probably sort of up there, a flip of a coin almost between him and Kudus in terms of an option to go for this week.
Definitely. And then the final pick we're going to go through in this video is Tijani Reinders. Obviously, off the back of that haul really against Arsenal from the 1 assist, he picked up DEFCON in that game as well, and a couple of bonus points. So a decent day out for him at the Emirates. Performance-wise, it was obviously interesting to see from a City point of view. We never really see them play that way ever under Guardiola, and it does suit the likes of Erling Haaland and Reinders, I think, on the counter attack a bit more. They seem to play like a little bit like that against Wolves as well. They were counter attacking. That's where the goals came for Reinders early on in that game. The run for City now is good. A lot of managers will be looking to Erling Haaland and maybe trying to add an extra piece or two to that. Obviously, Reinders could be that guy at 5.6 million. It's an absolute bargain price, and I think that's what would lure me in more so than the performances so far. Because when you look at the data, it's not suggesting that he's going to be involved in a lot of things. But when he's only 5.5 million, a guy you can maybe bring out as your 8th attacker, I don't mind it at all. I wouldn't be expecting a DEFCON from him really very much often now. Obviously, the 12 there, I think he actually finished on 11, but got a little bit lucky that the deadline shut. So yeah, it's a decent pick. One that I'm not going to run into, but if you need someone at that price point, I think it's a good one. Obviously, Ben, you own him. What's your thoughts on him at the moment?
Yeah, I think as long as Ait Nouri is going to be out, he is absolute gold dust in FPL at 5.6 million. And when Ait Nouri's back in the team, his appeal, in my opinion, does drop significantly just because of the system that Pep's playing. And I've been banging that drum, haven't I, for 5 weeks or so on systems and how Reinders will be impacted quite heavily by the system in which Pep plays. For the next 2 game weeks, at least, I think he's going to be fantastic. We're not sure on a return date for Ait Nouri yet, so we'll just have to wait and see. But it is really interesting how when the fullbacks for Manchester City are tucked in a little bit, it just does allow Reinders to box crash and really sort of make an impact as almost a secondary striker at times, almost playing like a Marmouche role at times. So yeah, again for the next couple, I think he's probably the best value midfielder in the game, which is a big call considering sort of how many sort of decent options we've got there at the moment.
Definitely. And keeping on Manchester City at the moment, obviously the talk of the town is a triple captaincy chip if you're not wildcarding. And we're going to talk through some pros and cons of it today. Ben, I think you're going to be, well, more than likely playing it. Spoiler alert for the
Yeah.
team reveals. For me, I'm more in the not in the con side. I do think it's a good week to play it, but I'm probably going to hold it a little bit off. Obviously, I've used 2 chips already this season, so don't want to get too crazy with them. But yeah, pros so far, obviously, 13 goals, 2 assists in 8 games. That's including international duty with that Moldova game. He's just in good form. The way that City are playing, I think, suits him as well a little bit better. Burnley obviously got the worst XGC so far in the league, 10.47. Despite the good defensive performances we've seen, they are still conceding, which is, I think a lot of people, specifically last week, were saying about Sunderland, Burnley, like they are good defences. Like but they are conceding goals still, so you can still target them. I wouldn't be get putting off by a couple of good defensive performances. And obviously, yeah, as I alluded to here, I do not expect him to play against Huddersfield. I think that's almost confirmed at this stage. So he's going to have a full week's rest, which for Manchester City and most of the European clubs is going to be almost unheard of as we enter arguably the busiest period of the football season. So yeah, Ben, any more pros or any more advantages you can think of as a triple captainer for Erling Haaland?
I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head at the end there. Is that this fixture schedule is going to be very much congested until the first half of the season ends, which I think is where that huge pro comes in. There is that element of unknown with holding it until a later date.
Yeah.
Whereas, now, based on what Pep's saying, yes, he's saying there's some sort of back issue. But a full week's rest, smoke and mirrors with the press conference. He should be back fine for the weekend. I think if he is fit and ready to go, for me it's pretty no brainer. The only sort of reasons I could think maybe why you wouldn't go for it is, of course, there's so many wild cards being activated this week, which therefore leads to you not being able to hit that triple captainship at the same time. So I think that's probably the biggest reason why you wouldn't, if your team is not in a great shape and you can't get to Haaland using your free transfers and then triple captaining, then you've got to work out how you're going to do that. And the wild card might be the play, which therefore leads to you actually having to look at other options that you go for. So yeah, I think the point at the end there, Josh, with the rest and recovery and how busy the schedule is going to be is the key sort of takeaway for me.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. I think if you aren't wildcard and you want, or even have an inkling that you want to play it, I definitely would be going for it. I wouldn't be talking anyone out of it, that's for sure. Obviously, Burnley is probably, like we say, probably one of the worst defenses in terms of expected goals conceded. They do manage to keep teams out though. That, like we saw against Liverpool, it took them a while to break them down until the very end. So I think a stubborn performance could be happening. I would say though that a home fixture is a lot more beneficial for Erling Haaland than that away fixture. Burnley's record at home was ridiculous. I think it was their first loss there since May 2024 when they were last in the Premier League. So yeah, the away fixture is definitely, well, the home fixture for Haaland is definitely more of a bonus. If you are looking at other triple captaincy options like myself, here is a list that I've sort of strung together of potential options. Obviously, as we alluded to earlier, that there's going to be a lot of fixture congestion around these. And whether Haaland, Salah, even Palmer for some of these even plays in these games is a massive thing. So if you are looking to captain one of the premium assets, then just bear that in mind, because there's a lot of Champions League. If they get to the latter stages of the League Cup, etc., then these fixtures could be impacted by rotation. So just bear that in mind. Obviously, there are a lot of home games and decent home games left for Haaland this season. If you are wild carding and you can't play it this week, then I wouldn't be too worried about it. There are going to be other weeks where you could probably match or do better than him. There's no guarantee that he's going to get a massive haul against Burnley. I think Salah's the interesting one here. Those games are just before AFCON, which is obviously when he's going to be out of the team. So I'd imagine a strong performance from him. I think that's Liverpool's sort of best run at the moment as well between now and AFCON is those fixtures. So one to keep an eye on. Obviously, with his form at the moment isn't as good as probably what you say about Erling Haaland. Cole Palmer's got some nice ones. Whether he's back from injury by game week 11 will be interesting to see. That's what sort of asterisk there, just because we don't know the level of fitness with him. And then I've chucked Bruno Fernandes down there just because he's got good routes to points. And also United won't have that issue of fixture congestion because they only play him once a week at the moment. So with no European commitments, no EFL commitments. So yeah, he's obviously going to be fresh and ready to go. And he always plays 90 minutes without fail. So if you are worried about that sort of minutes concern later in the season, then there's a few options there for Bruno Fernandes. Ben, obviously you're in the firm Erling Haaland this week camp. Where would you go sort of as a best of the rest if you weren't going to triple captain him this week?
Oh, it's difficult. But I think if Salah picks up form, he becomes a better triple captaincy option before he goes to AFCON, because of the midfielder element and more points for goals and clean sheet points and all of that sort of thing that comes alongside it. For myself, I'm looking at playing a chip probably in game week 13 or 14 anyway, potentially both. So that sort of rules that out for myself, triple captaining. So yeah, look, I think that all three Haaland options are good. It's just a case really of where your squad sits at any one given time and how that's going to impact it, because everyone's got a different squad. Everyone's going to have different opinions of when to play it. Like I said, those three triple captain options for Haaland, two out of the three could be 15-point hauls. One of them could be a point. So we're just not going to know, and it's almost sort of a little bit a luck of the draw here.
Yeah, I feel like it is one of the most luckier chips that you can play because he can. I think it was Southampton last season at home that a lot of managers went to triple captain him, and I think he got like a goal or a return, and it was like a 5-pointer. So yeah, it can definitely not pay off. The good thing this year though is that obviously you have two of them, so you know you can always bounce back later in the season when there's a double game week, which obviously is another pro of maybe keeping it because there could be doubles in the first half of the season. Although it's a small chance that there is that slight possibility towards the back end of the season, or first half of the season, should I say. Going into some questions then from Instagram, there's a few of you that sent them over. Obviously, hopefully we've covered a lot of them in the first part of the video or the main part of the video, but here are some sort of different ones. Hercules says, is Salah and Haaland viable? I know, Ben, you've maybe been thinking about trying to do that, but obviously probably easier on a wild card, right?
Yeah, definitely easier on a wild card. I think if you're looking to make some free transfers to make it viable, you're sacrificing quite a lot. So at this point, just given the form, etc., I'd maybe sort of lean against going with both of them, because it seems like, so far this season, there are budget options in each category that make it fairly easy to flip between the two, as you've shown, Josh, as well, with sort of the transfers you've made and using your wildcard fairly early, and you've still managed to sort of go between the two. So I think it's viable, yes, but it is one way you're taking a lot of risk on across the rest of the team, because if those two don't perform, then you're sort of in a bit of a predicament.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think at the minute there's no real reason to own Salah when his form's not been great. The fixtures are not looking great going forwards. They're facing a Palace side this week that are unbeaten in like 17 games, so it's going to be an interesting one. So for me, I'd probably just stick with the Haaland route for now, and then if you've got, like Ben mentioned earlier, about Bruno Fernandes, it's an easy switch then when you're doing like you can switch Bruno and Haaland to Salah and then João Pedro or someone like that. It makes the world a lot easier. The next question then is Stack or KDH, Kieran Dewsbury Hall, if you don't know his abbreviation. I've actually seen quite a few rotations with these two that look really nice. So if you are going Salah and Haaland, for example, that could be an option for you in like a cheaper sort of midfield duo, if you had to play one of them every single week. For me personally, I think Dewsbury Hall is better, but if you've got an Everton attacker, then I would go with Stack. I think they're both pretty decent assets, to be honest. I was quite impressed with Stack in Game Week 1 and then also last week where he got that big haul. Who do you prefer, Ben?
Yeah, I'm leaning more towards Dewsbury Hall, just on the fact that I don't own an Everton player personally. If I had to pick between the two, I would go there. Of course, a slight element of risk with Dewsbury Hall is just the fact that he's on sort of 4 yellow cards at the moment already. So look, you've got to be prepared and have enough bench coverage if you do go for him, in case he misses out on a game week in the sort of next few. So yeah, I think I prefer Dewsbury Hall there.
Yeah, and then Daniel's asking tips for someone who's been unlucky so far. He wrote it a little bit longer, but it was basically about his point scoring, and he feels like he should have more points than what he has so far. I think what I would say is that it's only been 5 game weeks, so the ranks are really close together. I think from my point of view, I'm like, well, I know it's really bad because every time I look at live FPL or the Fantasy Football Scout app on a Saturday evening, I'm at like 500k, all for Haaland to ruin it on my Sunday, and then I'm back out at like 1.5 million. So that's how close it is. It's like 10 to 15, maybe 20 points where you can half your rank, if not more, depending on where you are. For me, I know I'm not too far away from the top 100k. I'm about 30 or 40 points, which sounds like a lot in like a small game week, but over a season, that's really minimal and something you can really claw back. If you're anything inside the top 8 million, there's every chance you can finish like top 10k still. It's only been 5 weeks. Is there anything else that you'd add on to that, Ben?
Yeah, just say patience, really. We've had, what, 15% of the season so far. So we've not had too long. And if the decisions that you're making are good, then variance will pay out in the longer term.
Yeah.
So looking at the stats, taking into account what's happening on the pitch, and sort of making informed decisions will mean that, you know, maybe in the short term you won't get that outcome that you want, but over the longer term you will reap the reward multiple times, rather than sort of an unlucky game week or two in the first five means that you could be out sort of 3, 4, 5 million off the back of a couple of decisions. Whereas if you make a singular decision, that could, you know, have a much bigger impact over the longer term anyway. So it's all about patience, really.
Yeah, I definitely agree. It's like let's take the Haaland triple captaincy for an example this week. If that doesn't pay off, if you're still going to be happy with the decision of doing it, because the data and everything suggests that Haaland is going to get a decent return against Burnley this weekend, and it's just one of those things. If he was to blank, or if he came off injured early on, that's just, it is what it is. There's nothing really you can do about it. You just have to sort of pick it up and run with it. So yeah, if you're making the right decisions, like Ben says, I'm sure it'll come around sooner rather than later. The last one is I guess kind of similar. It's getting a bit like, I guess, psychology sort of thoughts into here. FPL is 70% skill, 30% luck. Do you agree? I think there is. I think it's 70% luck, 30% skill. I think his actual question was. I think there is luck involved, but as like you alluded to, Ben, over a season, I think the luck becomes less and less. Obviously, you can have more luckier seasons than others, but for me, I think the skill is more. I would say outweighs the luck. I don't know what you think.
Yeah, I think so. I think basically I see it as your highest point of luck is game week one. And gradually the percentage of luck to skill goes down and down and down each week, until essentially you're sort of at, you know, a really low point in terms of luck, and it's majority skill over the longer term. So yeah, I see it. I see it as a lot more skill involved than luck. That's why we see sort of managers with such consistent finishes. And there's a reason behind that. And I think you have to take that into account.
That's also why your mini league mates are usually ahead of you come game week 5, and then you don't hear from them after Christmas because they've usually given up by then. So yeah, it's all fun and games throughout the season. So yeah, that wraps up our game week 6 guide. Then obviously a massive week in terms of chips, a load of wildcards being played, triple captaincy chips as well. So let us know in the comments if you are indeed using a chip this week.
Yeah, absolutely. And as always, please remember to like, comment, and subscribe to the FPL graduates. I've been Ben.
I've been Josh.
And we'll see you guys
next time. Have a good game week, everyone.